In 1972, a film hit theaters that changed cinema forever. The Godfather wasn't just another gangster movie. It became a cultural earthquake. But here's the thing. The story that played out behind the cameras might be even more dramatic and more dangerous than anything we saw on screen. Because while audiences were watching Michael Corleone quietly transform into a ruthless boss, the cast and crew were living through a world of chaos. Studio sabotage that nearly killed the project. Real mobsters making sure their world was portrayed correctly. And actors who lost themselves so deeply in their roles that they carried those characters into real life. Some of the most iconic moments in the movie? They weren't scripted at all. They were happy accidents, nervous mistakes, or spur-of-the-moment decisions that somehow became cinematic legend. And some of the darkest moments? They weren't staged. They actually happened, sometimes just blocks away from where the cameras were rolling. Francis Ford Coppola, the young director at the center of all this, once admitted, "If I had known what I was getting into, I might never have made this film." And when you hear what really went down, you'll understand exactly why he said that. Because The Godfather wasn't just a movie about loyalty, betrayal, and survival. It was living those themes in real time. And once you know these hidden truths, you'll never look at this masterpiece the same way again. Long before the film became a cultural icon, the cast of The Godfather started slipping into their roles so deeply that the line between performance and reality began to vanish. What happened on that set wasn't just method acting. For some, it was a transformation that carried a heavy personal cost. Take Marlon Brando. By the time cameras rolled, Brando wasn't just playing Don Vito Corleone, he was living as him. The transformation started with surface-level changes, dental implants, dyed hair, padding in his cheeks to give him that bulldog jawline. But those were just the props. The real shift happened when everyone on set, from the cast to the crew, started treating him like an actual mafia boss. Cinematographer Gordon Willis once said, "People literally kissed Brando's hand between takes, not as a joke, but out of genuine reverence." Brando gave advice, mediated disputes, and carried himself with such authority that no one saw Marlon anymore. They only saw the Don. And then there was Al Pacino, a young and mostly unknown theater actor at the time. His personal journey eerily mirrored Michael Corleone's transformation in the film. Pacino admitted he began the shoot insecure, quiet, and unsure of himself, just like Michael at the beginning of the story. But as Michael hardened into a cold and calculating leader, Pacino found himself changing too. His walk shifted, his voice dropped, he grew quieter, more observant, even intimidating. Off camera, he couldn't sleep. He suffered panic attacks. The more isolated Michael became in the story, the more isolated Pacino felt in real life. It was as if he couldn't leave Michael behind when the cameras stopped rolling. James Caan, who played the hot-headed Sonny Corleone, faced an entirely different problem. His immersion in the role made him too comfortable with rage. After filming brutal fight scenes, he struggled to turn it off. He'd get into real fights at bars, lash out in traffic, and carry that volatility home. During the infamous scene where Sonny beats Carlo on the street, Caan hit with such intensity that he actually broke actor Johnny Russo's ribs and chipped his elbow. It wasn't acting anymore. It was pure Sonny. The toll spilled over into his personal life, with Caan later admitting his marriage fell apart during filming because he couldn't leave his character at work. Even supporting cast members felt the bleed-through. Robert Duvall, who played Consigliere Tom Hagen, was approached by people who genuinely thought he could give legal advice. Richard Castellano, who played Clemenza, found that locals in Little Italy started treating him like an actual mob figure, nodding in respect when he walked into restaurants. But perhaps the most unsettling moment came when real mobsters themselves approached Pacino in restaurants after the movie was released, leaning in to whisper, "You're not Michael, but you understand him, you're one of us now." That wasn't a compliment. It was a chilling confirmation that Pacino had embodied the role so perfectly that the underworld saw him as one of their own. The price of that authenticity? Each actor left the set a little different from how they came in. As Pacino later put it, "We all left pieces of ourselves in those roles, and we took pieces of them with us forever." Some of the most unforgettable moments in The Godfather weren't planned at all. In fact, They happen because of mistakes, chance encounters, or actors simply going with their instincts. That's part of what gives the film its raw, almost haunting authenticity. You feel like you're watching something real, not staged. Take the opening scene. Everyone remembers it. Don Vito Corleone, sitting in shadow, granting favors on the day of his daughter's wedding. It's one of the most iconic introductions in cinema. But what most people don't know is that the little cat Brando is holding, completely unscripted. It wasn't written into the scene at all. A stray wandered onto the set, and Brando, never one to miss an opportunity, scooped it up and started petting it as the cameras rolled. Instantly, it created this perfect image, a man capable of brutal violence, shown as gentle and tender with a helpless animal. That wasn't in Mario Puzo's novel. That wasn't in Coppola's script. It was pure accident and pure genius. Then there's the line that became one of the most quoted in film history. "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse." Believe it or not, in the script it wasn't written as anything special, just another piece of dialogue. But when Brando delivered it, with that whispery menace and casual shrug, it transformed into cinematic legend. The way he said it made you feel the weight of the threat without raising his voice. That was Brando's instinct, and it changed the line forever. Improvisation wasn't limited to Brando. James Caan shaped Sonny Corleone through physical energy that wasn't on the page. Cracking his knuckles, pacing like a caged tiger, exploding with sudden bursts of violence. That was all Caan. He gave Sonny a raw, unpredictable edge that made him unforgettable. And sometimes, his improvisations slipped into the dialogue too. During the scene where Clemenza disposes of a body, the script originally just said, "Leave the gun." But Richard Castellano, playing Clemenza, added a little twist. "Take the cannoli." That tiny off-the-cuff line became one of the most famous in the movie, perfectly blending brutality with everyday domestic life. Even Pacino's big turning point at the restaurant, the moment Michael kills Sollozzo and McCluskey, was transformed by an idea that came up during filming. Coppola felt Pacino wasn't showing enough of Michael's internal struggle, so he whispered to him, "Imagine a train building up in your head. The sound, the pressure, the release." They added the train sound in later, but Pacino carried that imagery into the performance. His eyes darkened, his whole body shifted, and suddenly the tension became unbearable. The close-up of his face in that moment might be the single most important shot in the movie, and it was born out of a spur-of-the-moment adjustment. Some unscripted choices even changed the emotional heart of the story. For example, the scene where Don Vito dies in the garden. In the script, it was a standard, solemn death. But Brando suggested something different. What if the Don was playing with his grandson, making a goofy orange peel mouth to make the child laugh before collapsing? Suddenly, instead of a grim exit, we saw the most powerful man in the story and his life in a moment of innocence and family. Death and tenderness combined in one unforgettable image. And then there's the slap that shocked even the actors. During a heated argument between Michael and Kay, Pacino suddenly struck Diane Keaton across the face. It wasn't written, it wasn't rehearsed, he just did it in the heat of the moment. Her reaction on screen isn't acting. That's real shock. Coppola kept it in the film because it revealed something raw and dangerous about Michael's character, and about how far Pacino had sunk into him. What makes The Godfather timeless isn't just that it followed a perfect script, it's that the movie allowed for real human moments, accidents, and improvisations to bleed into the story. Coppola himself admitted, "The screenplay was just the blueprint. The real soul of the film came alive when the cameras started rolling. And those unscripted choices, they're the reason scenes from this movie have been burned into our culture forever." The Godfather may have been a movie about the mafia, but the line between the story and reality blurred in ways that unsettled everyone involved. Because while Coppola and his crew were busy staging fictional hits, real violence was unfolding right outside their world of cameras and lights. During the filming of one of the movie's most crucial sequences, the restaurant hit where Michael kills Sollozzo and Captain McCluskey, Al Pacino recalls something chilling. Between takes, a man leaned in and whispered to him, "You know this exact scene really happened." Yes, right there. Across the street, he wasn't talking about the book or the script. He was talking about a real mob hit that had gone down in that same neighborhood years before. Pacino realized he wasn't just reenacting fiction. He was stepping into history. It didn't stop there. As production continued in Little Italy, the cast and crew began receiving unnerving warnings. Photographs would show up at the office, pictures of actors and crew members walking into their homes, getting into their cars, or even escorting their children to school. No notes, no threats written down, just the photographs. A silent message. We see you. The most terrifying overlap came during the filming of the now iconic baptism montage. On screen, Michael Corleone renounces Satan while his enemies are slaughtered across the city. But off-screen, that same week, a nearly identical pattern of real mob killings unfolded in Brooklyn. Same methods, same timing, almost like someone had taken their script and reenacted it in the streets as a demonstration. For the cast and crew, it was impossible not to feel that someone, somewhere, was sending them a message. Then came the day that truly shattered the illusion of safety. While shooting in Little Italy, the crew suddenly froze at the sound of real gunfire. Police officers sprinted past the set toward a crime scene just 3 blocks away. They had been filming a murder, while an actual one happened in real time, almost within sight of their cameras. The irony was suffocating. They weren't just making a movie anymore. They were sharing space with the very world they were trying to depict. And as if to underline the danger, the very mob boss who had initially opposed the film, the man who negotiated with producers to keep certain words out of the script, was himself gunned down in broad daylight while the movie was in post-production. Joseph Colombo Sr., head of the Colombo crime family, was shot at a rally in Manhattan in front of thousands of people. The attack left him paralyzed until his death years later. For Coppola and his team, it felt like the violence of the film had spilled over into their reality one final time. Coppola would later reflect that they weren't just creating fiction. They were dancing with the very powers we were portraying. And those powers were watching closely, reminding everyone involved that the Mafia wasn't just an idea for a movie. It was a living, breathing presence that had no problem making itself known. The Godfather wasn't just a dangerous movie to make. It was a movie shadowed by actual danger. On the surface, The Godfather tells its story through dialogue and plot. But Francis Ford Coppola and cinematographer Gordon Willis, nicknamed the Prince of Darkness, were doing something much deeper. They were hiding a second story in the visuals, a coded language that most people never noticed consciously, but somehow felt in their bones. Let's start with the most obvious and the most debated choice: the darkness. Nearly every scene in The Godfather is underlit, drenched in shadow. At the time, Paramount executives were furious. They claimed audiences wouldn't be able to see the actors' faces, but that was exactly the point. Gordon Willis wanted their eyes, windows to the soul, hidden. These men lived in darkness, moral and literal. And as Michael Corleone descended deeper into corruption, the shadows grew heavier, until by the end of the film, he was practically swallowed by them. Watch the wedding at the beginning. Sunlit, full of life. Then look at Michael in the final scene. Framed in near total blackness, his humanity sealed off with the closing of a door. And speaking of doors, Coppola used them like symbols. Characters framed inside doorways are standing at moral thresholds, about to cross from one life into another. The most devastating example is Kay, left outside Michael's office, watching as the door shuts in her face. That door doesn't just close on her. It closes on their marriage, on trust, on any hope of Michael ever returning to who he once was. One of the coldest endings in cinema, all told through a single doorway. Then there are the oranges. At first glance, they seem like a quirky coincidence. But look closer. Every time an orange appears, death is lurking nearby. Vito reaching for oranges when he's shot. A bowl of oranges sitting on the table before the horse head scene. The fruit spilling across the street as Vito collapses from a heart attack. Production designer Dean Tavoularis later admitted it wasn't always intentional. But once they noticed the pattern, they leaned into it. Audiences may not have registered it consciously, but on a gut level, oranges became a silent omen. The film even uses camera angles as judgment. Whenever you see a character from directly above, it isn't just stylish framing, it's fate, or God, or the family itself looking down. In those moments, The characters aren't in control. They're being watched and judged. Coppola once said, "Sometimes it's God. Sometimes it's the family. Sometimes it's destiny itself. Even the faces on screen were a code." Gordon Willis would film characters straight on when they were being honest, but shift them into profile when they were hiding something. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you'll see Michael's transformation tracked not just in his actions, but in the way the camera views him. Straightforward at first, but by the end, he's filmed in profile, almost unrecognizable from the young soldier we met at Connie's wedding. And then there's the religious imagery. The baptism sequence isn't just dramatic editing. It's visual irony, the sacred and the profane colliding in the same breath. Michael renounces Satan with one hand, while orchestrating murders with the other. The camera doesn't just show us a contradiction, it rubs our face in it. Coppola even used the frame itself as a trap. Instead of wide, cinematic aspect ratios, they shot in 1.85:1, a slightly tighter frame that creates a sense of claustrophobia. It's subtle, but it makes the Corleone's world feel inescapable. Every character is boxed in, by loyalty, by family, by choices they can't undo. These choices weren't flashy. They were invisible, woven into the fabric of the film so deeply that audiences absorbed them without ever realizing it. That's why The Godfather lingers. It isn't just the performances or the dialogue, it's because frame by frame, the movie is talking directly to your subconscious. As Coppola put it, "You don't need to notice these things, your brain notices them. That's why the film haunts people." If you think the mafia breathing down Coppola's neck was stressful, imagine also battling the very people who were supposed to be on your side. From the very beginning, Paramount Pictures didn't want Coppola's version of The Godfather. In fact, some insiders believe the studio actively tried to sabotage him. The first fight started with money. Paramount gave Coppola a budget of just $2 million, insultingly low for a period film spanning decades, packed with massive sets, costumes, and a sprawling cast. Producer Al Ruddy later admitted the numbers were designed to make us beg for scraps. Every day, Coppola was expected to stretch pennies into gold. And every day, the studio reminded him they could replace him if he failed. But it wasn't just money. It was constant psychological warfare. Coppola recalled how executives would send spies to his set, people reporting back every decision he made. They'd call him in the middle of crucial setups with budget emergencies. They'd feed conflicting instructions to his department heads behind his back, then criticize him when things didn't line up. Worst of all, they kept a list of replacement directors, circling names in red, and would conveniently leave that list lying around where Coppola would see it. Imagine walking into a meeting about your film, only to be reminded, visually, that the studio was already planning your funeral. Casting nearly killed the project before it began. Paramount wanted big, bankable stars. They pushed hard for Robert Redford or Ryan O'Neal as Michael Corleone, names that looked good on a poster. But Coppola dug his heels in. He insisted on Al Pacino, an unknown theater actor most executives had never heard of. Their response? Absolutely not. He's too short. He's not a star. For months. The battle raged. The same went for Marlon Brando. Paramount called him box office poison. Too difficult, too overweight, too unreliable. The studio only agreed to let him test after humiliating conditions. Brando had to work for free and post a personal bond of $1 million to guarantee he wouldn't cause delays. For an actor of his stature, it was unheard of. Even after the film was shot, the war didn't stop. Coppola delivered a 3-hour cut, what he called an American epic. Paramount panicked. They wanted a tight 90-minute gangster flick. When Coppola refused to butcher his vision, executives threatened to seize the negatives and cut it themselves. Coppola resorted to desperation tactics, secretly filming 2 versions of scenes, one clean version for the studio's daily reviews, and another for his real director's cut. He was fighting for his vision while pretending to compromise. It was exhausting, dangerous, and, in his words, I genuinely believed I'd never work again. While Coppola wrestled with Paramount's sabotage, an even more dangerous presence was watching from the outside, the real mafia. And unlike the studio execs, the mob didn't need memos or red-inked lists to make their point. Their message was simple. You're telling our story. You'd better get it right. The trouble began even before the cameras started rolling. A powerful group called the Italian American Civil Rights League, led by mob boss Joseph Colombo Sr., announced they were boycotting the film. Publicly, they claimed the movie stereotyped Italians, but privately, everyone understood the truth. This wasn't about stereotypes. It was about control. The Mafia was essentially telling Hollywood, "This is our world. If you want to profit from it, you need our blessing." Producer Al Ruddy quickly found himself summoned to a meeting at the Park Sheraton Hotel. Infamous in mob lore as the site of underworld killings, 5 men sat in the room. No introductions, no small talk, just one chilling line. "We know what's in the book. It better not be in the movie." It wasn't a request, it was an order. Ruddy later admitted his voice still tightens just remembering that moment. The crew struck a deal to keep the peace. The words Mafia and Cosa Nostra were banned from the script. In exchange, the boycott disappeared almost overnight. But that wasn't the end of the mob's involvement. In fact, it was only the beginning. Suddenly, men with no film experience started appearing on set. They weren't extras. They weren't consultants hired by the studio. They were mob advisors, giving tips on how a Don should hold his hands when giving orders, or how soldiers should show respect. As James Caan remembered, they weren't suggestions. They were corrections. And then came the phone calls. Late at night, several cast members reported receiving anonymous calls from men who never gave their names. The message was always the same. "Just checking you're portraying us with respect." The implication was clear. One wrong move, and they'd hear about it. Even specific scenes drew scrutiny. After filming the infamous horsehead sequence, Coppola recalled being pulled aside by a visitor who quietly said, "That's not how we do it, but it works for the movie." The casual tone suggested he was speaking from experience, and that was enough to send a chill down Coppola's spine. The truth is, Coppola and his team weren't just making a movie about the Mafia. They were making it with the Mafia's permission, under the Mafia's watchful eye. Every shot, every detail, every line carried the weight of an unspoken threat. Tell our story wrong, and there will be consequences. Years later, Coppola would reflect on this uneasy relationship. "We weren't just portraying their world," he said quietly. "We were living in it, and they were watching every step we took." When The Godfather finally premiered in 1972, no one could have predicted the cultural earthquake it would unleash. Remember? Paramount had nearly sabotaged it. The Mafia had tried to control it, and Coppola himself believed his career might end with this film. But instead, the opposite happened. It didn't just succeed, it redefined American cinema. The numbers alone were staggering. The film earned over $86 million domestically and $246 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing movie in history at the time. Practically overnight, it rescued Paramount Pictures from bankruptcy, transforming the studio from the weakest player in Hollywood into an industry powerhouse. The same executives who fought Coppola every step of the way suddenly claimed credit for his vision. Coppola later said with a thin smile, "The suits who tried to destroy the film became the geniuses who made it happen." But money was only part of the story. The bigger shift was in power. Before The Godfather, studios controlled everything. Directors were treated like employees, not artists. But Coppola's victory proved something radical. A filmmaker with a strong vision could stand up to the system and win. After The Godfather, directors like Scorsese, Spielberg, Lucas, and Friedkin gained unprecedented control. It was the birth of what critics call the New Hollywood era. The cast's lives were transformed forever. Al Pacino went from a virtually unknown stage actor to a global star, unable to walk down the street without being recognized. James Caan found himself typecast as a hothead, offered endless roles that mirrored Sonny's rage. Marlon Brando experienced perhaps the greatest turnaround of all. Once dismissed as box office poison, he was suddenly commanding record-breaking salaries, including $3 million for just 10 minutes of screen time in Superman. As Robert Duvall later put it, before The Godfather, we were actors. After, we were legends. But the impact of The Godfather went far beyond Hollywood careers. It permanently changed how Americans viewed organized crime. Gangster films before it were either glamorous or simplistic morality tales. Coppola's version was different. It portrayed the Mafia as a dark mirror of American capitalism, family businesses protecting their interests by any means necessary. The Corleones weren't just criminals, they were fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands. Characters the audience could both fear and sympathize with. And then there was the language. Going to the mattresses. Sleeping with the fishes. Make him an offer he can't refuse? Lines from the film slipped into everyday conversation, becoming shorthand for power, betrayal, or quiet menace. Few films in history have contributed so much to the cultural vocabulary. For Italian Americans, the movie also marked a turning point. Before The Godfather, they were often reduced to caricatures, pizza makers, buffoons, or one-dimensional thugs. Coppola and Mario Puzo gave them something more: complexity, tragedy, humanity. Not an excuse for crime, but a recognition of identity and struggle. As Martin Scorsese later said, Coppola gave us dignity, even in corruption. Of course, the film's legacy wasn't without irony. Its massive success helped usher in the blockbuster mentality that would later shift Hollywood away from risk-taking and back toward profit-driven decisions, the very mindset Coppola had fought against. But in the early 70s, The Godfather represented something rare: a victory of art over commerce, vision over corporate compromise. 50 years later, its grip on our imagination hasn't loosened. It's still studied in film schools, quoted in politics, referenced in television, and felt across generations. When people talk about perfect movies, The Godfather is always near the top, not because it's flawless, but because it feels inevitable, as if it wasn't invented, but discovered, waiting for the right people, at the right time, to bring it to life. In the end, the irony couldn't be sharper. The film that studio executives tried to kill and the mafia tried to control is the very film that immortalized them both. Long after Paramount's corporate memos are forgotten, and long after mob families fade into history, The Godfather remains. Not just a movie, but a legacy. Not just entertainment, but immortality. Looking back, The Godfather was never just a movie about crime families. It was a film born out of the very same forces it portrayed: loyalty, betrayal, power, and survival. Behind the cameras, Coppola was waging a war against his own studio, fighting to protect a vision everyone told him would fail. Outside the sound stages, the real mafia was watching, making sure their world was shown with respect. And in between, the actors themselves were surrendering pieces of their souls to characters so powerful, they carried them off the set and into their own lives. The improvisations, the accidents, the unscripted choices, they weren't just happy mistakes. They became the heartbeat of a film that still feels alive 50 years later. From a stray cat in Brando's lap to a door closing on Kay's face, these moments transformed a gangster flick into an American myth. And maybe that's why The Godfather endures. Because it wasn't polished, safe, or corporate. It was fragile, chaotic, constantly on the edge of collapse. A story about family that nearly tore apart the family who made it. Out of that chaos came a masterpiece, one that would save a failing studio, redefine Hollywood, and carve itself into culture forever. Francis Ford Coppola once said, "If I had known what I was getting into, I might never have made this film." But he did. And because he did, the world of cinema was never the same. So the next time you hear someone call The Godfather the greatest film ever made, remember this: its real story wasn't just on the screen. It was in the shadows, in the fights, in the whispered threats, and in the sacrifices no one saw. That's what gave it power. That's what made it immortal. And if you thought this story was wild, wait until you hear what went down on the set of another 70s classic. Studio sabotage, on-set disasters, and last-minute miracles that should have buried the project, but instead turned it into history. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Before you go, I want to know, what's the one scene from The Godfather that stuck with you the most? Was it Michael in the restaurant, Vito in the garden, or maybe that final door closing on Kay? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I love hearing which moments haunt you the same way they've haunted audiences for 50 years. And if you enjoyed uncovering the hidden truths behind this masterpiece, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And subscribe so you don't miss the next story we dig into. Trust me, the next one is even crazier. Because in Hollywood, as in life, it's never just about what you see on the surface, it's about the secrets hiding underneath.